In the last shop moving video, we threw a ton of mud on the wall. So in this video, we have to sand it all down, paint it, and unfortunately, I discovered a disgusting, moldy, termite-y mess in what will be my office and spray room behind a bunch of shelving. So we have to tackle that. That way we can start moving a ton of machinery into this shop. Before I sanded all the mud that we laid in the last video, I went ahead and taped and mudded this weird door that had been filled in with the backside of a piece of drywall. And after letting that dry overnight, I sanded this section down. And while I was in the mood for sanding, I went ahead and sanded the case opening, as well as the entire everything in that little room, which took forever and absolutely destroyed my shoulders and neck. I don't know how drywall crews do this. It was exhausting. Especially this. This was the hardest part, was sanding the ceiling. There was just so much drywall dust falling down all over my face, and I couldn't find my dang glasses, so I was just completely eating it up. And when I went home to shower, just all of the dust congealed into drywall in my hair. It was a disaster. But we got it all done, and it was well worth it. The next project that I wanted to start tackling was the ceiling in the main shop space. But to do that, I had to get absolutely everything out of the main shop space. So the few tools that I had in here, I hopped on the forklift and moved them into the small room.
Feels a little bit precarious. This is exactly why I raised the ceiling in here. This is our rig. We'll set the sheets on here, lift it up, and then we'll be under here. We'll be tied in. Then we'll just go, and we can put up the ceiling super fast. It's super sturdy. I don't know if it's physically possible for me to do that. I don't know, do I?
Well, you're gonna have to like push it.
Yeah, we'll drag it.
After putting a nice hole in the wall, we eventually figured it out.
Let us repair to the main chamber. Project Vulcan is about to begin.
After a couple hours of moving everything around, it was finally time to start laying the roof on. This was a pretty easy, simple process, and it took a little less than a day. We just had to put the sheets up, mark them, cut them if they needed to be cut, and then put about 50 screws in each panel. We were screwing them onto metal struts that the roof had before we did anything, and it was pretty simple. So we got a bit of a problem. There was shelves here, we moved them out, and now we have discovered that there's mold all over the drywall. And not just that, drywall is completely ruined. Like, you just touch it and it literally just falls apart. So we gotta replace a whole panel here, then against that wall, we gotta do the same thing. So let's do more demo, yay! At this point, it had been over a month since the hurricane, meaning that I have had no income since the hurricane. I was starting to get really stressed out and just needed to start rushing to get this done so I could start making money again. And this whole process of demo, remodel, and moving in ended up taking almost 3 months.
This is insane growth. That used to be a 2x4 once upon a time. Alright, so the way these wires are done is goofy. So this
light turns off, the switch turns off not only the lights in here, but the outlets in the shop next to me, which turns off his Wi-Fi and his stereo. So we need to not let that happen. So I'm going to take this wire that runs up into the corner, run it through the hole in the drywall, underneath the wall, to that outlet, and then rerun this switch. This whole process of rewiring this little segment of this room ended up being a way bigger pain than I thought. This ended up taking like 3 hours, and it was just not something I wanted to have to do. Getting this wire through the drywall was a way bigger task than I thought. It ended up taking like 30 minutes. But once I got that done, moved over to the other side of the wall and removed the drywall and all the bad framing and the plastic bag that was just absolutely covered in mold. After treating the bottom plate with a heavy dose of termite killer, it was finally time to start reframing stuff out. Now, I'm going to use pressure treated here, even though I know you're not really supposed to use it inside, but I figured it would hold up a lot better because it is touching the concrete. I also went ahead and left a little gap, and then temporarily nailed in the rest of the framing, and then went back and screwed everything in. Which means it's now time for everybody's favorite thing, more drywall work. Yay! After I cut the sheet to fit, I went ahead and just threw in a bunch of screws, securing it to the wall. One tool that was really helpful with all this remodel work was that laser level. Just put it on a tripod and you line up your lines. It just gives you a really easy reference point to follow, and you don't have to spend time marking and measuring. You just set it up and roll with it. But once I got the other side done, I went ahead and cut and screwed up this next panel, and then I went ahead and repeated the process for the center panel. Now, I'm sure there's some reason why you're not supposed to have horizontal and vertical panels on one wall like this, but I don't really know. This was just the cheap, fast way to do it. We have drywall, and we have a bucket of mud, so let's combine these two. And all this went up surprisingly quick because I have done it a handful of times by now. Doesn't look super pretty, but gosh darn, it worked and it's still holding up. Pulling out the forklift bucket again, that way I can raise myself up to this gross air vent thing that isn't even hooked up to anything. This vent literally goes nowhere, but I figured I might as well leave it. So I went ahead and installed this new pretty looking one. And while I had the bucket on the forklift, I figured I might as well go ahead and put up some smoke detectors. I had a mistake hole. I thought the light was going to go here, then I ended up changing my mind, so I figured it'd be the perfect spot to go ahead and throw up one of these smoke detectors. And then the other smoke detector, I just went ahead and put on the opposite side of the shop. It's finally time to start running power to the tools. So drill a hole, run some conduit through it, push some wire through it, and now it's time to actually start putting in some outlets. But I was having so much trouble getting this outlet in. The metal studs, don't know why, could not drill through them. After breaking several drill bits, I aggressively dropped my drill and happened to break a battery. But after a good 30 minutes, I eventually figured it out. And from now on, I just avoided the studs. I think one of the most important things about having a functional and efficient shop is having a ton of outlets, especially in the right place. So I do most of my work on table, so I wanted my outlets pretty high up. So I have them at like my neck level. On each side of the shop, I ran a 120 outlet every 8 feet, which just gives me a ton of outlets pretty much everywhere in my whole shop and has been super helpful. I made sure to put each run of outlets on a different breaker. So there'll never be more than 1 or 2 tools, maybe 3 running on the same breaker, especially for the 220 and 3-phase. I made sure to spread it out over as many breakers as I could. Now this did take a while because I installed like 30 outlets, but I really got into a flow. I just put all the stuff I needed on this cart, that way I could just roll it along with me. And now because I have so many different types of tools in the shop, well actually right now I have no tools in the shop because I've evacuated because of the forest fire that is right down the road. Check out that video right here.
But because I have so many different types of tools, I found it really important to run different currents of lines on the same wall, all right next to each other, so I can rearrange my tools whenever I want, and there's always an outlet set up for it. So basically, the way I did it is I have my 110 running across right here, my 220 running across right here, and then below that I have my 3-phase power running across on both sides of the walls. So at any point, if I get new machinery, I can completely rearrange my entire shop and not really have to move anything. Occasionally, I'll have to move the dust collection lines, which I also ran right above the outlets, but that's pretty easy. I've rearranged my shop around 6 times at this point now because I just keep getting new machinery. So stacking these lines and the dust collection all in sequence was a complete game changer and made my shop way more versatile. Also, a great little tip is for each one of my tools, I make a folder with all the different parts, the manuals, and all the info about it, any modifications that I've done to the tool, and then I hang it on the outlet that it's plugged into.
It feels like it's taken forever at this point. Lots of long nights, here past midnight, getting everything ready, but we're on the final 2 steps before we start moving equipment in. We have to paint, chose this nice baby blue, my logo color, and we went ahead and put 2 coats of that up. Now, the last renter of this space was a potter, so there was like a 1/2 inch of clay on the ground. So we went ahead and mopped the floor a dozen times. I mean, this took like 4 hours. There was just so much clay, and you could see it going down that drain. But that's all for today, and tune in next time where we're going to move all of my machinery in and set up all the dust collection.